There is a man who drives a 10-year-old Toyota Camry to work every single day. He wears the same type of plain t-shirt in rotating colors. He eats lunch at home most of the time, and when he does go out, he picks a simple diner, not a rooftop restaurant with a dress code. His neighbors think he is struggling. His coworkers assume he never got his big break. And yet, this man has more money sitting in his accounts right now than most people will earn across their entire working lives combined. He is not struggling. He is not broke. He just stopped caring about what you think of him, and that is exactly why he is wealthy. This is not a story about one man. This is a pattern. And in 2026, it is becoming so widespread that if you are still using visual signals to judge who is doing well financially, you are going to get it wrong almost every time. The game has changed completely, and most people have not noticed yet because they are still playing by the old rules. So let us talk about what is really happening, why it is happening, and most importantly, what the psychology behind it tells you about how money actually works in the mind of someone who has built real, lasting wealth. The first thing you need to understand is that the way wealth was displayed for the last 3 decades was never really about wealth at all. It was about status anxiety. When people feel financially insecure, one of the most powerful psychological responses is to signal the opposite. It is called compensatory consumption. You buy the thing that tells the world you are okay, you are successful, you made it, because somewhere deep inside, you are not fully convinced of it yourself. The luxury car, the designer bag, the first-class upgrade posted on social media, these are not just purchases. They are emotional statements. They are the financial equivalent of someone laughing too loud at their own joke because they are not sure it was funny. And for a very long time, this behavior was rewarded socially. If you showed up to a meeting in an expensive suit and drove away in a high-end car, people assumed you were good at what you did. The visual shortcut worked, so more and more people leaned into it, and the culture of visible wealth became its own economy, a multi-trillion-dollar machine built not on what people needed, but on what they needed others to see. But something started shifting, and it accelerated dramatically going into the mid-2020s. The people who had actually accumulated serious wealth began to notice something uncomfortable. They noticed that all the performance of wealth was exhausting, expensive, and did absolutely nothing for their actual financial position. In fact, it was actively working against it. Every dollar spent maintaining an image was a dollar not growing. Every purchase made to impress someone was a transaction driven by someone else's opinion, not by their own values or goals. And once you see that clearly, you cannot unsee it. There is a psychological concept called identity-based decision-making, and it is central to understanding everything we are talking about here. Most people make financial decisions based on the identity they want to project outward. They are buying a version of themselves for public consumption. But the wealthiest people in 2026 have almost universally made the same internal shift. They have moved from external identity to internal identity. They know who they are without the props. They do not need the car, the watch, or the outfit to confirm it. And once that shift happens, spending patterns change dramatically and permanently. This is not a small thing. This is one of the most significant psychological transitions a person can make around money. Because as long as your financial decisions are tied to how others perceive you, you are essentially letting other people control your bank account. You are outsourcing your self-worth to strangers, and you are paying a very high price for that privilege. Now, here is where it gets really interesting, and this is the part that most people miss entirely. The truly wealthy in 2026 are not just avoiding luxury spending because they have become minimalists or because they read some book about stoicism. They are avoiding it because they have developed what psychologists call a high tolerance for invisibility. And that tolerance is itself a wealth-building superpower. Think about what invisibility means in financial terms. When you are not trying to look rich, you are not competing with anyone. You are not on a treadmill where your spending has to match or exceed your peer group to maintain social standing. You are completely free to allocate your resources according to logic, strategy, and long-term thinking instead of emotional reactions to social pressure. That freedom compounds over time in ways that are almost impossible to fully calculate. Here is a real scenario. Two people make the same income. One of them spends a significant portion of that income on things that make them look successful. The apartment in the trendy neighborhood, the wardrobe, the restaurant circuit, the car. The other person lives in a modest place, drives something reliable, and puts the difference into assets that grow. 10 years later, the gap between those two people is not just financial, it is psychological. One of them has spent a decade training their brain to associate money with immediate social reward. The other has spent a decade building the neural pathways of patience, delayed gratification, and identity independence. Those two brains are going to make very different decisions for the rest of their lives. This is behavioral psychology applied to real wealth accumulation, and it is why the visible difference between the two people in year 1 becomes almost incomprehensible by year 20. Compounding is not just a financial principle, it is a psychological one. Your habits of mind compound just as surely as your interest does. Now let us talk about 2026 specifically, because there are some unique cultural and economic forces at play right now that are accelerating this trend faster than anyone predicted. The first force is the widespread collapse of the aspirational middle-class illusion. For years, there was a very specific fantasy being sold across every media platform. If you worked hard, displayed success, and aligned yourself with the right brands, upward mobility was not just possible, it was inevitable. But enough people have lived that story all the way through now to see how it ends. They bought the outfit, they drove the car, they posted the lifestyle, and at 50 they had a beautiful Instagram feed and very little actual financial security. That reckoning is happening on a massive scale, and it is changing behavior in real time. The second force is the information environment. In 2026, more people than ever before have access to genuine financial education. Not the get-rich-quick noise, but real, substantive understanding of how wealth actually builds. And when people learn how wealth actually builds, the first thing they realize is that looking wealthy and being wealthy are almost perfectly inversely correlated for most people in the early and middle stages of wealth creation. The money you spend performing wealth is the money you could have used to create it. This is not a complex concept, but for a long time, it was not widely understood in a visceral, personal way. Now it is. The third force is the shifting social reward system itself. Here is something remarkable that has happened. The culture of conspicuous consumption is increasingly associated not with success, but with insecurity. The psychological sophistication of the general population around money has increased enough that more and more people can see through the performance. Showing up in a luxury car no longer reads universally as success. Among certain growing and influential circles, it reads as someone who is trying too hard. The social calculus has genuinely shifted. And when the social reward for performing wealth decreases, the behavior changes because behavior is always following its rewards. This connects to something called social proof reversal, and it is one of the most powerful behavioral dynamics in the current financial culture. Social proof normally works by making you want what other successful people have. But when the definition of success itself changes, social proof starts working in a completely different direction. When the people you most admire intellectually and financially are the ones living simply and building quietly, you start unconsciously moving toward that model. And right now, in 2026, that is exactly what is happening across the demographic most likely to build generational wealth. There is also something deeply psychological happening at the individual level that we need to address because it is at the core of this entire shift. Truly wealthy people have resolved a conflict that most people are still living inside of. The conflict is this. There is a part of every human brain that wants recognition, wants to be seen, wants to be validated. And there is another part that understands that real security comes from internal stability and actual resources. For most of us, those two parts are in constant tension, and the tension is expensive. Every time the first part wins, it costs you money. Every time the second part wins, it builds your actual foundation. The people who consistently build real wealth are not people who never wanted recognition. They are people who found a way to get their need for recognition met through channels that do not cost money. Through the quality of their work, through their relationships, through mastery of something they care about. Once you root your need for validation through those channels, the pressure to spend on status evaporates, and the financial consequences of that change are enormous. Let us also talk about what this means for how you read the people around you, because this has real practical implications. If you are still using visual signals to determine who is worth learning from, who is worth partnering with, who has the kind of financial intelligence you want to absorb, you are going to miss the most important people in every room you walk into. The person in the simple clothes sitting quietly in the corner might be the one whose decisions you should actually be studying. The loudest person at the table, the one with the most visible markers of success, might be the one whose financial habits are the most dangerous to copy. This is not about romanticizing poverty or pretending that all visible success is fake. Plenty of genuinely successful people display that success in traditional ways, but the filter you use to identify who deserves your attention and respect can no longer be visual in the way it used to be. You have to go deeper. You have to ask different questions. You have to look at how people talk about their decisions, how they handle uncertainty, whether they seem at peace or whether they seem to be constantly performing. Those are the real signals now. There is also a generational dimension here that is worth understanding. The younger generations entering real financial maturity in 2026 grew up watching their parents and older siblings perform wealth in the traditional way, and they watched the outcome of that performance up close. They saw the debt, they saw the anxiety, they saw how thin the margin was between the appearance and the reality. And a significant portion of them made a quiet decision. They decided that they wanted the substance more than the symbol. This is not a universal truth about any generation, but as a trend, it is real, and it is significant, and it is reshaping what status actually means for the people who will be building wealth for the next 30 years. Now, I want to bring this back to something very personal and very immediate, because everything we have talked about so far is only useful if it changes something in how you think and how you act. The question is not whether wealthy people look broke in 2026. The question is what this tells you about the relationship between your mind and your money right now, today. Are your spending decisions driven by who you actually are and what you actually value? Or are they driven by the story you are trying to tell other people about who you are? Because if it is the second one, you are not spending your money. You are spending it on behalf of other people's opinions, and you are not even charging them for the service. Every single purchase you make is either moving you toward actual financial independence or it is moving you toward a performance of it. And the brutal honest truth is that those two directions are almost always mutually exclusive in the short and medium term. You can build real wealth or you can perform wealth, but trying to do both at the same time with limited resources is a trap that keeps millions of people financially stuck while they look increasingly successful to everyone around them. The psychological work here is not about becoming ascetic or denying yourself joy. It is about figuring out what actually brings you joy versus what you have been conditioned to believe should bring you joy. Those are often very different things, and the gap between them is where a lot of wasted money lives. Start paying attention to how you feel after different kinds of purchases. Not in the immediate moment of buying, because dopamine is going to make that feel good almost regardless. Pay attention to how you feel 3 days later, 3 weeks later. Does the thing you bought still feel like it added something real to your life? Or does it already feel like it was more about the moment of acquisition than about anything lasting? That feedback loop, when you actually listen to it, will tell you more about your relationship with money than any budget spreadsheet ever could. The truly wealthy people of 2026 are not special because they had more willpower or more discipline than you. They are where they are because they did the internal work of separating their identity from their possessions early enough that the compounding had time to do its job. They stopped performing and started building. And the building, over time, made the performing not just unnecessary but genuinely uninteresting to them. That shift is available to you too. It is not a secret. It is not a privilege reserved for people with certain incomes or certain backgrounds. It is a psychological move, and psychological moves are always available to anyone willing to look honestly at their own patterns and decide to change them. The people who will be genuinely wealthy 10 years from now are already making decisions today that look unremarkable from the outside. They are driving average cars and living in sensible homes and putting money into things that grow while their peers are putting money into things that impress. They will not be easy to identify by looking at them. They never are. But you can become one of them. And it starts not with a financial plan but with a question. Whose opinion have I been spending money to manage? And is that person actually worth the price I have been paying? That question, sat with honestly, can change everything. If any of this resonated with you, please consider subscribing to this channel. We talk about exactly these kinds of things here, the psychology behind how wealth is attracted and built, the mindsets that separate people who thrive financially from people who struggle despite working just as hard. There are people going through the exact same questions you are right now, and they found this community and told us it changed how they see money entirely. You deserve that too. Subscribe and go watch another video here. Let it keep working on you. That is what this channel is for.